Let me ask you something. When did you start walking on eggshells in your own relationship? When did you begin choosing silence over honesty, just to avoid tension? Most men don't notice when it happens. It doesn't come all at once. It's subtle, gradual. You tell yourself you're being patient, understanding, emotionally mature. You think you're doing the right thing by keeping the peace. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. You're slowly letting go of the very traits that made her feel attracted to you in the first place. And the hardest part? She probably won't tell you when it starts fading. She won't sit you down and explain it clearly. She'll just feel the shift and respond to it. Her energy changes. Her interest drops. The connection starts to feel different, and you're left trying to figure out what went wrong. So you adjust even more. You become more careful, more agreeable, more available. But the more you try to be safe, the less she feels anything at all. Not frustration, not excitement, not even attraction, just neutral. And neutral is where connection quietly disappears. There's a pattern here that most men never see until it's too late. But once you understand it, everything changes. Because this isn't about saying the perfect words or avoiding mistakes. It's about something deeper. And once you see it, you stop guessing and start leading. Here's where most men get it wrong. They think the goal in a relationship is to avoid mistakes. Don't upset her, don't create tension, don't say the wrong thing, keep everything smooth, easy, predictable. On the surface, that sounds responsible, mature even. But underneath, it's driven by something else. Fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of conflict. Fear of not being enough. So instead of showing up honestly, you start managing her reactions. You filter what you say. You soften your opinions. You hold back parts of yourself just to keep things stable. And without realizing it, you shift from being authentic to being strategic. But attraction doesn't grow in that environment because attraction isn't built on perfection. It's built on emotional experience. Let that sink in. It's not about everything going right. It's about something feeling real. And when you're constantly trying to avoid tension, you remove the very thing that creates emotional movement in the first place. Think about how it started. You were more grounded, more certain. You had your own rhythm, your own life, your own direction. You weren't trying to impress her. You were just being yourself. That's what drew her in. But over time, you began adjusting. You gave more. You became more available, more agreeable, more careful. And slowly, that edge disappeared. This is the pattern most men never notice. The moment you start playing not to lose is the moment you stop showing up in a way that makes her feel something, and when that feeling fades, everything else starts to follow. The first trap looks responsible on the surface, but quietly weakens the connection underneath. You start believing your value comes from what you provide, your work, your effort, your ability to make her life easier. So you step up, you handle things, you solve problems, you carry the weight, you become the dependable one, the man she can rely on no matter what. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. Stability matters, but here's where most men lose the balance. You begin to believe that if you just provide enough, she'll feel enough. So you work longer hours, you push harder, you focus on building a better life for both of you. You make sure she's comfortable, supported, taken care of. But while you're doing all of that, something important starts to fade. Your presence, your attention, your emotional connection with her, because you're so focused on building a life for her that you slowly stop being in it with her. And this is where the disconnect begins. A woman can appreciate everything you do and still feel distant from you. She can respect your work ethic and still feel no emotional pull. She can enjoy the comfort and still feel like something is missing because provision creates comfort, but comfort alone does not create desire. Desire comes from emotional connection, from shared moments, from feeling seen, engaged, and connected in real time. And when that emotional connection starts to fade, she usually doesn't point it out right away. She adapts. She becomes quieter, less expressive, less reactive. And you might misread that as peace, but it's not peace, it's disconnection. You think everything is fine because there's no conflict. You're doing your role, you're showing up, you're providing. But in her experience, something has shifted. She's no longer feeling you, she's just benefiting from you. And that's the moment the dynamic changes. You go from being the man she feels something, to the man she depends on. And those are not the same, because someone can rely on you without feeling deeply connected to you. That's the line most men never see until it's already crossed. The second trap is more subtle, because it often feels like love. It doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like care, effort, consideration. You start adjusting your life around her. You move things in your schedule to fit hers. You cancel plans just to be available. You say yes more often than you say no. You avoid pushing back even when something doesn't sit right with you. And in your mind, you justify it. This is what a good partner does. But let's be honest about what's really happening. At what point did you stop choosing yourself? Because that's the shift. You're no longer showing up as a man with his own direction, his own boundaries, his own standards. You're slowly reshaping yourself to maintain harmony. And while that might feel right in the moment, it creates a long-term problem because attraction doesn't grow from constant accommodation. It grows from contrast, from knowing that you have a life that doesn't revolve entirely around her, from feeling that your time, your energy, your attention, they have value. And value comes from limits. This is where respect is built, not through control, not through distance, but through boundaries. When you have standards, when you say no when it matters, when you don't abandon your priorities just to please, you communicate something without saying a word. I respect myself. And that's something she can feel. But when you remove those boundaries, the message changes. Now it becomes, you can have all of me anytime without effort. And the moment something becomes unlimited, it starts to lose its perceived value. That's not a flaw in her. That's human nature. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how her energy shifts when you're focused on your own goals, when you're busy, driven, slightly out of reach? She leans in more. She engages more. She becomes more attentive. That's not random. That's her responding to your boundaries. Because boundaries create space, and space creates curiosity. But when you're always available, always agreeable, always adjusting, you become predictable. And predictability removes emotional tension. Not the unhealthy kind, but the kind that keeps things alive. So over time, she stops chasing. She stops investing. She starts getting comfortable. And eventually, she starts taking you for granted. Not because she's trying to, but because you trained her to expect it. That's the part most men never see. Respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you reinforce every time you choose not to abandon yourself. The third trap is the one most men justify the most, because it feels like maturity. You tell yourself you're keeping things calm, you're being patient, you're choosing peace over unnecessary drama. So when something bothers you, you let it slide. When she crosses a line, you ignore it. When you disagree, you stay quiet. And in your mind, that feels like control. But look a little deeper, and you'll see something else. You're not creating peace. You're removing honesty. Let me ask you something. How long can you pretend something doesn't bother you before it starts changing how you feel? Because it always does. You don't explode right away. You don't argue. You don't create scenes. You just slowly pull back. You become less expressive, less engaged, less open. And she feels that shift, even if you never say a word. Because emotional distance doesn't come from conflict, it comes from what's left unsaid. Women are highly aware of emotional changes. They may not always explain it logically, but they feel when something is off. So when you avoid conflict, you don't make things clearer. You make them confusing. She senses something has changed, but she doesn't know why. And when she realizes you're not being fully honest, something deeper starts to break. Trust. Because trust isn't built on always agreeing. It's built on truth, on knowing that the person you're with will express what they actually feel, even when it's uncomfortable. When you avoid that, you send a message without realizing it. I'm not confident enough to stand in my own reality. And that weakens the connection far more than disagreement ever could. Here's the truth most men never hear. Conflict, when handled calmly, creates clarity. But silence creates distance. and distance slowly turns two people into strangers who are just coexisting. You might still talk, you might still spend time together, but the connection, the real connection, starts to fade because she's no longer experiencing the real you. She's experiencing the version of you that avoids tension. And that version doesn't feel solid. It doesn't feel grounded. It doesn't feel trustworthy. So over time, she stops leaning in. Not because you argued too much, but because you didn't show up honestly enough when it mattered. Now we get to the part that changes everything. Because if you look at all three traps, over-providing, over-accommodating, avoiding conflict, they all come from the same place. You're trying to keep the relationship safe. You're trying to remove friction, eliminate risk, and make sure nothing goes wrong. But here's the truth. Most men never realize. Attraction doesn't grow in perfect safety. It grows in emotional movement, in presence, in direction. And the moment you start playing not to lose, you stop showing up as someone she can actually feel. This is where the shift happens. Not in doing more, not in saying the perfect things, and definitely not in trying to control her, but in something much deeper, emotional leadership. Let's define it clearly. Emotional leadership is your ability to stay grounded in yourself and set the emotional tone of the relationship, not by forcing anything, not by dominating, but by mastering your own state first and then influencing the dynamic through how you show up. Because whether you notice it or not, she's constantly reading you, your tone, your reactions, your presence, your energy. And she adjusts based on what she feels coming from you. That's the part most men completely miss. She's not just responding to what you say or do, she's responding to how you feel to be around. If you're reactive, she feels tension. If you're passive, she feels pressure. If you're grounded, she feels calm and clarity. Your internal state becomes her external experience. So if you don't have control over your emotional state, you don't have real influence over the relationship. And let's clear something up. Emotional leadership is not about control. It's not about being dominant, rigid, or always in charge. It's about being steady, being the one who doesn't collapse under pressure, the one who doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable, the one who can feel emotion without being controlled by it, because that's what creates trust. And trust is what allows attraction to grow instead of slowly fading away. Here's the line you need to remember. She doesn't connect to the man who tries the hardest. She connects to the man who feels the most stable to be with. And that kind of stability doesn't come from effort. It comes from emotional leadership. Really understand this, you need to see the contrast clearly, because not all men show up the same way emotionally. And women respond very differently to each type. The first is the reactive man. He gets triggered easily. He reacts without thinking. When tension rises, he either argues to win or lets his emotions take over the situation. With him, she feels instability. She never knows how he's going to respond. One moment he's calm, the next he's frustrated or defensive. That unpredictability doesn't create attraction. It creates emotional tension in the wrong way. Now let's talk about what actually changes. When you start applying this the right way, not in theory, but in how she responds to you. The first shift is emotional safety, and this isn't about comfort or routine. It's deeper than that. When she feels that you're steady, that you don't overreact, withdraw, or lose control under pressure, she relaxes. She stops holding back. She opens up more naturally. She becomes more expressive, more real, because she no longer feels like she has to protect herself from instability. The second shift is respect, not the kind that comes from what you have, but from how you show up. She starts to see you as someone grounded, someone who doesn't fold under pressure, someone who stays consistent instead of reacting emotionally. And that changes everything. How she speaks to you, how she listens to you, how much weight your presence carries. Because respect is not something you demand, it's something she gives when she feels your stability. Then comes attraction, and this is where most men misunderstand everything. Attraction doesn't grow because you try harder. It grows because of how she feels when she's with you. And when you lead emotionally, you create something rare. She feels understood, without you losing yourself. She feels guided, without being controlled. She feels connected, without being pressured. And that combination is powerful. So what happens next? She starts leaning in. She reaches out more. She invests more. She thinks about you more, not because you're chasing her, but because of the experience she has with you. Here's the key shift. She's no longer trying to figure you out. She's simply enjoying being with you, and that's where real connection lives. So let's bring this all the way back. Most men were taught that being a good partner means giving more, doing more, and avoiding mistakes. That if you just stay patient enough, careful enough, and consistent enough, the relationship will naturally hold itself together. But now you can see the flaw in that thinking, because attraction was never built on over effort or emotional self erasure. It's built on experience, on presence, on emotional direction, on how you show up in the moments that actually matter. The real shift happens when you stop trying to protect the relationship at all costs and start leading it with clarity and stability, not by controlling her, not by forcing outcomes, but by controlling yourself, your reactions, your presence, your decisions. And when that changes, everything else follows, because now you're no longer reacting to her mood, her behavior, or her uncertainty. You're setting the tone. You're creating the emotional space she steps into. And that's where connection becomes real, not in perfection, not in constant agreement, but in grounded leadership when things are uncertain. Let's be clear, she doesn't stay because everything is easy. She stays because being with you feels steady, real, and emotionally strong enough that she doesn't want to lose it. So pick one thing from all of this: presence, honesty, boundaries, direction. Start there and stop playing it safe. Because the moment you start leading instead of protecting is the moment everything begins to shift. Now it comes down to one simple question. Are you still trying to manage how everything looks on the surface? Or are you finally willing to change how you show up underneath it? Because everything you've heard here doesn't work as theory. It only works when it becomes behavior, not once, not when it's easy, but consistently, in real moments, under real pressure. That's where most men fall back into old patterns. They over-explain, they over-accommodate, they avoid tension, and slowly, without realizing it, they return to the same cycle that keeps repeating in their relationships. But now you've seen the pattern, and once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. So don't try to fix everything at once. That's not the point. Pick one shift. Be more present when you're with her. Speak your truth instead of filtering it. Stop abandoning your own direction just to keep things smooth. Make decisions without second-guessing yourself. Start there. Because the moment you stop trying to protect the relationship at the cost of yourself and start leading it with clarity and stability, that's the moment everything begins to change. If this resonated with you, comment the word "lead" below. And more importantly, don't just understand this, live it.